Hey everyone, welcome to Dracast. The footage you're going to see playing in the background here is one of our fights at Ash, pretty much uncut. But before we get started, I'd like to tell you a bit about why we decided to make a podcast for the ESO community. The past few years, group gameplay has been slowly dwindling in-game, with fewer and fewer guilds participating or striving to compete. We feel like groups like ours are really underrepresented in the community right now. Groups in the game can really make a huge difference to the activity in different areas on the map, as well as to the feeling of competition in day-to-day PvP. And I hope that this might be a nice way for those who enjoy playing in organised raids or wish to know a bit more about it, to come try and learn and improve, as well as to have a voice in the community. This is only our first episode, so try and go a bit easy on us, and I hope you guys enjoy. So I think we should start by introducing ourselves. I guess I can go first. I'm Izanerys, or Izanagi if you play on EU. I'm a member of Dracarys, and I raid lead, and I'm GM there. I'm also playing with Zerg Squad on EU. I play a Magicka Nightblade Bomber, as well as a support Sorc quite often. And I was also part of Banana Squad back in the day.
Yeah.
Vile, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Alright, so I'm Vilestride, obviously. I've been playing since launch as well. I started on DC and moved to EP when I wanted to join a guild there. I've always been interested in like the guild scene, like looking up to the top guilds. When I started, I saw No Mercy die, all of these guilds playing, and pretty much just wanted to be able to do what they do. I play a lot of support roles. I've always been predisposed towards this kind of role. Right now, I'm doing a lot of playing healing roles. I always felt like there was a lot of room to grow in this, and there was less people doing it, so there was more need for it, basically. And I thought I could fill that gap myself.
Cool, okay, Sanct.
Yeah, hey, I'm Sanct, I'm raid lead and guild lead of Zerg Squad. I'm playing on an A with Dracarys as well. Personally, I've played every kind of PvP, but I prefer the organized raids of like 12 to 16 people maybe, because you can be much more offensive compared to smaller groups where you have to kite a lot, and I personally prefer that over small scale, even though sometimes I do enjoy small scale as well. Yeah.
Okay, Anairi.
Hey everyone, I'm Anairi. I've been playing since beta mainly as a Magicka Templar. I also enjoy all types of PvP and often play in more small scale fights, but as Hank said, my favorite type of PvP is highly organized raids, where the focus is on achieving something challenging together as a guild. I currently playing with Dracarys on NA and Zerg Squad on EU, and was previously part of Banana Squad. In raids, I play as a healer or support.
Okay, so that's our Groupaholics Anonymous done. Let's move on. I guess we should kick this off by starting with defining a bit of like what we consider, small scale, large scale, Zerg surfing, all that type of stuff to be, and just so you can kind of get an idea of where we're coming from when we're discussing certain topics.
Yeah, our perspective on it.
So, I mean, for small scale, do you want to go, Vile?
Yeah, like I guess I know. I consider if you're talking about small scale, it's you either 1, 2, 3. I don't know. The number's pretty arbitrary, but just kind of skirmish type fighting. It's obviously a highly skilled, requires a lot of in-depth knowledge of game mechanics from you. Have to be really knowledgeable about your class to be successful. High emphasis on stuff like kiting, stringing people out, picking the fights, and understanding your limits and what you can engage on. High emphasis on resource management and timing your damage combos and that. I would consider large scale or raiding, raiding to be just like upscale of this. Except now, kind of instead of an individual, you're 12 people working together as an individual. The difference here is, I suppose, you should be able to engage on any size fight. You shouldn't have to kite as much around. That's the aim anyway. Still requires a lot of the same individual skills, resource management, survivability, but focusing now on more, like teamwork and communication. Yeah, they're kind of where I see them sitting as far as playstyles.
Okay.
I don't know about you.
I guess like the way I kind of define it is more about the enemies that you're fighting, or what you're aiming to fight at least. So, I mean, for small scale, like in general, like my aim is to fight, roughly equal numbers or maybe slightly outnumbered, but because we're a much smaller group, it's much more focused on like in a series of individual 1v1s and people taking care of themselves and that sort of thing. For large scale, and even as a small group, I think you can kind of participate in large scale, but trying to fight enemy raids, trying to fight faction zergs that are stacking inside keeps and resources, just I think that's much more about the enemies that you're fighting, and then that sort of lends to what sort of skills you need to take out those enemies. So small scale, more sort of 1v1 survivability. Large scale, more sort of AoE with dedicated supports and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I very much agree with Izanagi there. Like, I think like small scale and large scale are more like where you fight rather than actually like what your group looks like. In my point of view, since as Izanagi said, if you just like, I mean, I guess like if you go between enemy lines, for example, and try to like gank some people, maybe like not participate in like the huge siege, then you maybe like do more small scale, and if you're like going to where the huge battle is like 100 versus 100 or something, if there was that many people still playing. But yeah, so if you go to like those huge fights, then you're still playing large scale, even if you go there with a small group in a way.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. But if that's the case, then where do we fit, like, where do you consider to be zerging in that, or zerg surfing? I don't want to say zerg surfing really, but just, what about for everyone else who's not so organized? Like, what would you consider that kind of gameplay?
I think for me, like the distinction I'd make is when it's like one or two guys zerg surfing. Like for me, zerging is kind of following your faction from keep to keep in large numbers, really kind of over-numbering objectives. And zerg surfing is kind of like where you're just one or two people following that. And large groups can also zerg surf, but I think it's kind of important to make that distinction between when a organized group is following the pug zerg compared to sort of one or two guys all making up that zerg.
Yeah, I think like I'm not even so sold on like saying zerging means like overwhelming or outnumbering people. Like I think for me zerging just means like if you go to Alessia Bridge, you're gonna have an EP zerg and an AD zerg there, which is like where all the pugs are gonna go, no matter like if they're outnumbered. Like you just have two zergs fighting each other, still two zergs when they're like the same number. Just the spot like where you like expect all the pugs to go. If you're going there as well, you're zerg surfing or zerging, kinda.
Well, for me, there is a difference with zerg surfing between players running in solo or small groups along with a faction just to play PvP and relax, compared to whole organized raids doing so. In the first case, it's just the daily flow of PvP and gives organized groups targets, as well as providing a small safety net for new players. The second often hurts gameplay, as it causes more and more of the same behavior as the groups throw more numbers at the problem just to make it go away. At the same time, in my opinion, it's preventing these groups from improving by having no challenge at all.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but I think it's important to reiterate. I think we're generalizing a lot. I don't think it's like particularly a dirty word. Like I think this is like the point where everyone starts. We come in, we spawn at the gate, we walk out our door, and we attack the first thing like we see when we start playing this game. It's important like to have people who are just casually playing be able to group up together like in that natural flow of like the fight, and it seems like it's just overwhelming, but this is the majority of players who are casual, and we need that population to have a healthy game. I think without all three of these game styles together, the game would just be dying off, and that's a problem that we're seeing right now. So
I completely agree. I think like for me, zerging and zerg surfing is kind of the bread and butter of PvP for the majority of players, and all styles are valid. People should be allowed to play whatever style they choose. I think, like as Anairi said, like where the distinction from me comes in is if you're trying to be an organized group and you're trying to like really optimize and fight these zergs, then you shouldn't also then go and also contribute to them as your mainstay of PvP.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely,
you
I agree
always
there
have
too.
a choice where to go as organized, right? So you can either stay on this bridge forever for the whole night with your whole faction, or just go somewhere else and try to create some fun fights for your own group.
I think that is the best way to improve as well, like your gameplay. So it's not gonna like you said it yourself. You're not gonna get much better with so much support behind your back. You're not gonna be able to distinguish your achievements from everyone else's achievements.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think like we can probably move on to like the main topic we wanted to discuss today. We kind of wanted to discuss like what sort of problems groups are having and what sort of issues you might face if you're trying to make a group of our style or just in general in ESO PVP. So starting with that, I guess we could go to like the willingness to change roles and builds and everything like that. So for me, like there's a really big difference right now between the type of player who's really willing to change everything that they're doing. Take off their solo build, go for more group support build, group gear, maybe group HP levels, or ultimates, maybe even remorphing or reskilling. That sort of player compared to the people who are just, I will run this build in everything, and doesn't matter if my group is supported or not. I'm just going to run that, maybe run without TeamSpeak, run in one of the herd of players that's good enough for them. And I think we can kind of look at the difference between PvE and PvP. It's kind of similar as well. So in PvE, a lot of the time in raids, like if you're not running the maximum DPS build, then you're not going to last long in this raid. Like as well as that, you don't obviously have as much supports and things like that in PvE, but you do have a very dedicated healer, you have dedicated tank role, you have that clear definition of that is your role and that's the role that you're doing. And in PvP, that's quite often lost in most groups, I find.
Yeah, definitely. I think like if you want to participate in this kind of organized group play and really step up your game like that, it's you really have to drop an individualistic like mentality. Everything you do, from your gear, your bar, you have to do it with the thought in mind. How does this contribute to my group? And then if that contribution is warranted, is it the optimal way to make that effort? Like I think people would be really surprised by how hard it is to find people who have that mentality. It's a struggle when recruiting, and I'm sure any leaders who are trying to put that kind of group together completely understand that that it's not so easy to find someone with that thought process. It's hard to say to someone like, I don't know, just an example, someone might want to join your raid as a DPS and you want them to roll a Magicka Nightblade because that's pretty much the meta right now, and they just would insist that their Stam Templar or whatever is going to be just as effective. It's a mentality that's rarer than you'd think.
Yeah. I would like to expand on what Izanagi said about like people not being willing to change the roles. I think it even goes as far that like in the community, like people look down on groups because people play specific roles when it's actually like what's really important. Not in like in every kind of group, like in every sport you have people playing different roles, and like everywhere, like I mean even like in our society people have different jobs to to be really good at something rather than like doing everything. Like imagine you would have to like bake your own bread and something, or like build your own PC like from scratch without like it wouldn't focus on different things to be effective. And I find it like really surprising that like in this game so many people don't want to like benefit to the group by just like focusing on one thing and just want to do everything on their own, even though it's like kind of obvious that it won't be effective, and people look down on this kind of PvP.
Yeah, the community perception of it's definitely doesn't contribute positively. Like it makes it harder to find that kind of person as well.
Yeah, so I think in terms of community, we saw in the last week or so guilds and stuff saying how they wanted to exercise like a HP level limit for their raid and how they were getting criticized by other guilds for doing that. And like a similar sort of thing happened with us when we started using Plague.
Yeah, I can add to that as a Dracarys member. Like, for example, on the Navy, we faced a lot of problems when we started to run Plague Doctor in our groups. Players who didn't even want to be a part of groups were openly hostile to the fact we were trying something different and considered it excluded them. It was actually very interesting to see the reaction between players who were up for trying and testing something compared to players who didn't want to make any extra effort. And of course, when we first mentioned this set, people thought that we are crazy and it would never work. There are many people that were trolling us, and they're still trolling about running group-focused builds, whether it's a high HP or just simply something else different. So yeah, I think it might be a good example of how difficult it can be sometimes to organize a proper raid in many terms, not just in terms of classes and roles, but even gear setups.
Yeah. I think it's really like we have seen it before, you know, groups commit to an entire like set build. I know like we've seen guilds do Phoenix even, you know, and that was pretty cool. And it's whether or not the strategy is good is almost besides the point. Like whether or not Plague Doctor is really effective or you know Phoenix is really effective. It's not even the point. The point is like it's really good to see an entire raid able to commit to testing and trying one strategy. You know, I think if you're not even able to do that, you're obviously not going to progress. So that
Yeah,
mentality
for
is like definitely important. Just the willingness, like you said, like willing to try it and test it and you know commit to it as an entire raid, not just you know what you want to do yourself.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, that's kind of the main thing is, being able to try things as a raid is like one of the most important concepts, I think, to, both guilds that we're in together. Like someone might say, hey guys, let's try this today, and not being like super against it and saying, well, maybe it's good, let's discuss it, okay, we kind of agree, it might be nice, let's test it, and then being able to review that after the raid, like objectively, and say, okay, well, what did we fight today? Is it a good comparison? That sort of thing, and that's how like all of our sets have been tested so far.
Yeah. And I think it's also very important to kind of think about it because like there's been so many different metas in this game, but where do those metas actually come from? I mean, at some point everyone played with Steel Tornado, then everyone played with Detonation, and it's not like someone at ZOS said, like, yo, players, this is how we're gonna play now, this is the meta here.
Redefined.
You can read it on our website. I mean, this meta, it always comes from groups trying something out. Like, of course, sometimes it's like a bit promoted by some changes, but in the end, I remember on EU, for example, like when the Death Jolt came out, like we were the only group who was using it, and we completely face rolled every other guild like for the first 2 days because they were still using like the other ultimates and were like, oh no, like Death Jolt is bullshit. I read it on the forums. It's like super weak. And then we completely destroyed them for some days, and then they started to realize like, oh yeah, maybe they're onto something with this Death Jolt. Or like before that, maybe with like negate or something, whatever it was. Like, it's always it always takes someone to make the first step to change the meta in a way. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that just because something is different from what you think is good right now, it doesn't mean that there's nothing else that can be better. So I think it's like very, very important insights that like you have to be like up for new stuff because you're never gonna improve if you don't risk something.
It always takes testing and measuring your results, like absolutely.
And you can be like more reactive and say, okay, well, we're not going to test something ourselves, but we're going to be prepared to change and try something if someone else has tested it. But I think like the thing is, the perception of like group gameplay and actually going for these type of builds and specializing in a certain direction is so bad in the community right now, as you've brought up in the past. People quite often say, oh, you're just playing like easy mode, or you just need to press one button and that's all you do to win, and you should play something hard and things like that. And I think it's completely different.
Like this whole like, oh yeah, you only play one role, you only press one button. Like, it's so weird. I mean, no one would say like, oh yeah, like it's super easy to be a goalkeeper at football or like whatever other sport you want to take because you only focus on one thing. Like what the skill comes into play is like focusing on that one role and playing it as effective as you can. I mean, you can play Nightblade, Bomber, and Raid and only spam Sap, like many people on the forums like claim this is what Nightblades do, but I mean, you're never gonna be effective that way. Like other people gonna outdamage you by like the factor 2 or 3 or 5 maybe. You can play a healer and only spam healing springs, but like maybe you're gonna die because you don't know when to move. Like there's like so much between, like it's saying like in Raid you only press one button and follow the crowns, like such an understatement.
Pretty
And-
reductive,
Yeah, and yeah.
There's like, yeah, there's so much of it's contextual too. Like, you know, you hear it's easier to run in a 12-man than a 2-man, and sure, that's true if you're fighting 4 people. You know, obviously it's easier to kill 4 people with 12 people, but like it's about what you're doing. It's about the objective you're undertaking and the gameplay you want to participate in. If you're a 12-man, you don't want to fight 4 people. Like you let them go most of the time. You ride past them. You're chasing other groups, other organized raids. You're chasing the big fights of 40, 50 people plus, like entire factions, like, you know. So it's contextual. You know, if you're 2 people and you're fighting 8, you know, 4 times your numbers, then that's like, if they're scrubs, if they're not super experienced players, then that's going to be a fight you can win. And the same can be said if you're a 10-man and you're fighting 80, you know, or 40 people, 4 times your numbers. Like, that's a fight you can win if they're not particularly, you know, as experienced as you. And obviously if the skill level's equal, then it's going to be a nearly impossible task. It's really just context, like the context you want to put it in. I see it as.
I also add something to the reason why I think community don't really like organized raids at the moment. Like, from my point of view, organized raids quite often can contribute to some of this bad feeling by being aware of their own behavior in the game. For example, most groups spend a lot of the time going from one keep to another with a whole faction sometimes, not even trying to unstack from other groups and bugs to go somewhere else and create their own fight, as I said before. And there are also guilds that go somewhere to PvP a keep, and then as soon as opposition appears, they either wipe really fast
Just
or leave the
leave.
keep. Or leave the keep, like without even fighting, just to go somewhere else, just to take another empty keep. And as a result, we don't really have a lot of different and fun fights going on the map, even though, especially like this kind of group, organized guilds could really contribute to spreading fights around if they focused on it.
Yeah, I think that's
well,
a very good point.
You could say then, like, so what are you looking for as a large group or even small scale, any of those scale, you know, gameplays that we kind of talked about before? Like, would it be fair to say that ultimately you should just be looking for challenging fights that help you improve yourself? Like, would that be the best way to put it simply?
I think
Yeah, I think so.
for me, I would just say as a group lead myself, like my kind of aim whenever I'm running a group is, one, to have the best fight possible. So for me, that's fighting enemy groups or much larger numbers. And secondly, you know, to make sure the map sort of stays roughly balanced so that we can find those kind of fights very easily away from our faction. You know, because if we get pushed all the way back to the gate, then, you know, there's only going to be one fight on the map, and that's for the scroll, and all of our pugs are going to be there. But if we are kind of roughly equal, maybe we have BRK, maybe we have Chal, and that's sort of where the pug kind of zergs are, we can quite easily go and take, you know, Glade or Fairgirl, or, you know, roaming between those keeps and find some really unique fight of our own to make one even there.
What do you think
Even
about
like-
last time keep?
Well, I think Last M Keep is kind of fair game to a certain degree. I mean, yeah, for me, like, obviously it kind of depends who the Emperor is. Like, if it's someone who, you know, doesn't really make any difference on the map or isn't in the, like, group that you're trying to fight and making it super hard, then you should probably just let it go. I mean, the tick is always nice, but it's generally not worth the lag. Like, I'd much rather go away somewhere and farm somewhere else. But if it's like Last M Keep and it's the only thing on the map, then I'd much rather go and break it up and, you know, suffer from this.
There's a lot to be said about map play as well, and just the distinction between playing the map and just looking for fights, because they're not, you know, they're not entirely separate. So, like, it's if we're off at Faragil holding 40 AD there, just fighting them because we want the fight, that also has a positive impact on the map for our faction, because that's 40 AD who aren't somewhere else pushing our keeps, you know. So it's still helpful, and it's, as long as you're participating in some way, it's still map play, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even like to a certain extent, ganking can be considered map play. You know, if you're ganking between the keep that's under attack and the keep
Yeah,
that they're
absolutely.
resupplying from, then to a certain degree, like that could be construed as map play. But I mean, for me, and I think for both our guild, our primary objective is to go into a backline keep and get as many people there as possible and survive for as long as possible, and ideally take the victory at the end.
Yeah, even just like, good fights. I mean, just an example. I've definitely we've had fights where we're fighting another group, you know, and it's a really intense fight, and we're near a keep, and we see it flagged, and it's going, and it's about to flip, you know, to yellow or whatever, and we forfeit the keep just to stay in the good fight against this other enemy group out in the middle of a field somewhere. It, like, seemingly has no relevance, but that's what we're seeking, you know, just challenging fights under the best circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think all of us would always prioritize, fighting an enemy raid above fighting some Zerg of pugs there, not really aware of their surroundings and can just be kind of rolled over with a couple of storms. Like having the interplay of going back and forth, maybe you push this time, maybe you don't. It's so much more challenging and interesting than just like rinse and repeat inside a keep.
With not seeing, like, I feel like we don't see as many raids around anymore, like as it used to be, you know. Like everyone used to, it was the scene. I feel like a big issue with that is leaders and a lack of leaders. Like there's just not as many these days as in the past, I suppose, or not as many people willing to lead a group. Like, do you think that has much effect?
Yeah, I think like it's one of the biggest reasons. And again, I think it's not only like the lack of leaders. I think it's also like the requirement to be like a successful leader is much higher these days. I remember like some time ago, like many patches, let's say, you didn't really have to do that much as a leader. Like I was like way calmer back then. I was just like, yeah, let's go over there and kill these guys. And then everyone can like still like play
Definitely
on his
wasn't.
own kinda. But I mean nowadays I think it's like, especially because of high damage skills like Dash Jolt, for example, or like the buffed negate again now that you can't CC break simply. I think like like as a leader you have to react much faster and make the right calls, because if you don't make the right calls, the group is gonna die in no time. So I think
Punish faster.
yeah,
So
I
you
think
mean
it's like
you think
really
there's like less room for error now?
yeah, exactly. It's like there's almost no room for error, and I think for many people, like if they start leading, it's just really hard to get experience with it, because you just die really fast if you have a bad leader. So like if you start leading, your group is gonna die really fast, and people in your group gonna get angry and be like, oh yeah, who's this guy, this leader, he's super bullshit, I'm out, and then you don't really have any chance to improve. And I think many guilds struggle with that. So I think this might also be a reason why people just go to Zerg surf with the raids, because they know if they go away from their faction, go to some backline keep, gonna fight like 2-3 times their own numbers as enemies, and they're just gonna die really fast, and then will get blamed for the wipe. People are gonna be upset. So maybe for people it's just like more relaxed to just stay with their packs, have an easy time, just be happy and kill like half their group. In a 20-man group, kill like 10 enemies is what I mean.
Yeah.
And just be like, oh yeah, damn, we wrecked these guys completely. And then everyone's happy. And yeah, I think it's definitely a bit like a big factor.
Like, to be honest, I think one of the main reasons why so many guilds have quitted over the past couple of years is because there have been many critical changes for how groups can play. These changes have increased the level of organization and effort that is needed from groups to be able to take on challenging fights, both from raid leaders, as you said, and from the whole group as well. Like, for example, originally you could run a Magicka build and have a rapid maneuver on your back bar to cast it only once every disengage and you're good to go. Nowadays, basically everything you do in raid breaks rapid. Any damage you deal or heal, that's why you need a dedicated player to cast it. And another example is push change, when you could push everyone in the group, even outside of the group. Nowadays, it's only 6 members. There are so many debuffs now which can apply on character in big fights that purging once in a while is simply not enough, and it's just not gonna work. The majority of groups have never fully adapted to these changes, in my opinion. There are often not many people that actually want to play such specific roles in group because they aren't considered to be a good players if they do so. This in turn means the roles ignored or passed away to less capable members who are often like more accepting of being told what to do rather than engaging with this role themselves. And these roles are one of the most important in raid, in my opinion. And also, I should say that guilds, which used to be top PvP guilds, can quite often be seen wiping in situations where in the past it was a lot more forgiving. Like, for example, even one bomber can wipe some raids in a few seconds. At this point, it's clear that it becomes frustrating for groups that used to be a good when they can't achieve the same level of gameplay that they got used to before, and like when they are not happy with the results all the time, they simply don't want to play anymore and just quit, as we see.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said as well ties back to community perception as well. You mentioned, people taking a lot of shit pretty much for wanting to adapt some of their strategies and change different things. Leaders in particular, I mean, it doesn't help as well. Like, to even start the game, to even start a new guild, people are going to have to be recruiting from zone. But even just with that act comes so much ridicule for a pug leader. You cop all the titles of being a pug lord, a zergling, like you cop all this crap from the community, and you're just trying to start a raid. Like, it's no wonder there aren't many anymore. I for one used to never see it. People used to advertise in zone non-stop, and the other guilds would just go about their day, go about their fights, and so would everyone else, and before you knew it, you had 2 times as many guilds we had now, like active around the map, competing for things. That's, everyone starts there somewhere.
Yeah, I can just add to that, like I was on my AD character recently on Vivek, and just messing around, and I saw a zone chat and a few guilds advertising there, and there was so lot of flame towards the people that were trying to recruit new members in zone chat. I was just like terrified. Like, why would people do that? I just don't understand. People just try to recruit members to the guild just to improve or maybe even play for the campaign, and they just get sort of flame and rage towards them. I just don't get it. I don't understand why people do this. Yeah.
And I mean, like, the thing as well is, like, generally it's people who don't even want to engage in that sort of style of play anyway, who are the ones flaming that. I mean, to a certain extent, like, sure, I can understand players being worried that if they only ever encounter these large groups and all they want to do is play solo, then they don't have a chance of really killing anyone there. But, like, it's never going to be the case that the whole community goes and plays only one style. So, like, by completely raging out on, like, one style, you're just eliminating it from the game. No one wants to be forced to just, it's a whole field of 1vx's, and, like, they never XV1 anyone there, so none of them get clipped, kind of thing.
Yeah, and, like, I think we agreed on that earlier. Like, the game's healthiest when all 3 game styles are balanced and considered and respected. Like, simply.
Sure. Yep.
I think, from just quickly going back to like the leading point of view, a lot of guilds struggle often with like their identity as a guild. So like for Dracarys and for Zerg Squad, our identities as a guild is like we're there in a backline keep trying to fight as many people as possible. And when your leader isn't confident in that, or your group members aren't confident that that's your actual aim, it can be like really difficult to actually make that your focus, or get to that level. It's very difficult for people to trust players who want to lead. I've been in raids where people have taken over and, people are just running away from the group because they think, oh, I'm not dying here, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And like, well, actually, if you gave him a chance and you actually said, okay, well, it's not going to be great right now, but in the future it could be something really great. That's like when something good can actually come of it. And I wanted to go back to like the point that I think Anairi, you mentioned, recruiting in zone chat and stuff. Like, I see a lot now, like one guild kind of controlling pugs in zone. It might be one guild on EP who make 2 or 3 raids with all the pugs, and they're like the well-known pug raid, or the same on DC. And then like these guilds are surprised that other groups don't kind of form from their faction.
Definitely, it's a caution as well. Like you have to.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you need to like make sure that as a community that you're sustaining and that everyone has a combined goal, because obviously every guild wants like the best players they can get for their raid and they want the best performance. I don't think there's any group that says, oh, I want to just like recruit anything and just do whatever in PvP. Maybe there are, maybe just the people who enjoy the campaign, they're happy with that as long as they can have a nice time just running, chatting. And I've been in guilds like that before, and it's nice to just go and sit there and chat shit and just like take it easy and play a bit. But like when it comes to like the guilds who are clearly wanting to see themselves as a really strong guild who are then doing the same thing, I think it sort of gets kind of beyond that.
Guilds can always evolve too, and it's good to see, and we've definitely seen exemplary cases of it in the past. You got to start somewhere, and it takes that, like you said, like definition and finding like your own identity and purpose and what you want to achieve with your group, and really thinking about that and analyzing yourself and your own gameplay to evolve as a group. All right.
I think like that's pretty much all we wanted to talk about.
Talk forever.
About
I'm sure
like
we'll come back with
different things.
Other episodes.
So yeah, like for future episodes, we're kind of thinking about recapping, how groups used to be in the game for like those who weren't around at the start, and some other things going on from that. Maybe some, guides or
some ESO history and
yeah.
Tell us what you want as well. Like if there's topics you'd like to hear from us and want us to talk about, like definitely let us know somehow.
Yeah, we are basically making this podcast, as we said at the start, to promote group gameplay on both NA and EU server. We want to give people ideas how to improve their groups and organize raid guilds to become more competitive and independent on the map. We would like to try and help improve daily gameplay in Cyrodiil too by encouraging groups to be more confident and spread out to make the map more balanced and interesting for everyone. So we hope you like the idea, guys, and looking forward for your support.